Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session, World Bank session, Designing Livable and Thriving Cities. I'm Christopher Pablo of the World Bank, and I'm team lead of the Tokyo Development Learning Center. The World Bank is very grateful to the City of Yokohama for the partnership and collaboration in facilitating knowledge exchange on decarbonization. This afternoon, the World Bank is given the opportunity to share two flagship studies focusing on cities and climate change. The first report is called Thriving, Making Cities Green, Resilient, and Inclusive in a Changing Climate. And the second report is called Unlivable, What the Urban Heat Island Effect Means for East Asia's Cities. I am also pleased to again welcome participants this afternoon, including from Cambodia, Indonesia, Philippines, Samoa, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. Before I introduce the speakers, we will have the welcome remarks by Anna Wellenstein, Regional Director for Sustainable Development for East Asia and Pacific Region of the World Bank.
Distinguished guests, my name is Anna Wellenstein. I am the Regional Director for Sustainable Development for the East Asian Pacific region in the World Bank. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this World Bank session on building thriving and livable cities. This session will discuss two important and closely related World Bank reports. The first is our global flagship report on cities and climate change called Thriving. The second is our new East Asia report, which considers the implications of the so-called urban heat island effect for East Asia's cities and the actions that these cities can take to combat extreme urban heat. Globally, cities are home to more than half of humanity, while in the East Asian Pacific region, 62% of people live in cities. And by 2050, 70% of people globally will be in cities. Historically, cities have been the great drivers of prosperity. Over the last 30 years, East Asian Pacific region cities have experienced a more than twofold increase in urban population and a near quadrupling of GDP. However, climate change is increasingly exposing cities to extreme weather events, as well as to another variety of slower moving stresses, including climbing average temperatures. At the same time, cities suffer from an urban heat island effect that causes them to be hotter than their surrounding rural areas. The cause of the urban heat island effect include relative lack of vegetation and a greater prevalence of impervious surfaces in cities. The urban heat island effect intensifies the impact of climate change on temperatures of urban residents, especially in cities with hot and humid climates like we have in East Asia and the Pacific. Together, these pressures threaten to undermine the prosperity, inclusiveness, and livability of cities. Cities are also major contributors to climate change, producing 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. More than 50% of global urban CO2 emissions come from cities in East Asia and the Pacific. Both in the region and globally, more sprawling urban development is associated with higher CO2 emissions. By intensifying demand for air conditioning, the urban heat island effect is also contributing to these emissions. With this in mind, we need to identify development pathways that help cities both mitigate climate change and the urban heat island effect while also enabling them to better adapt to the stresses of climate change. To better understand these challenges, Thriving looks at data from 10,000 cities globally, while our East Asia report on urban heat focuses on 3,000 cities in East Asia. While the challenge of cities and climate change demands that the international community do more to innovate and to finance solutions, at the same time, there's a lot that city leaders can do. This is especially true when it comes to tackling extreme heat by mitigating the urban heat island effect and promoting greater resilience to heat waves through, for example, investments in early warning systems. Between now and 2050, the world's urban population will increase by more than 2 billion people, with more than 25% of this growth occurring in East Asia and the Pacific region. As such, much of the region's urban fabric remains to be built, and this is a big opportunity we need to grab. The next phase of city building will have important implications for the prosperity and resilience of the region and broader poverty and sustainability goals. The World Bank mission is a world free of poverty on a livable planet. It's imperative, both for the climate and poverty reduction, that we move away from the current fragmented and sprawling pattern of urbanization that are all too common in lower-income countries. We need a different path that involves more compact and connected urban growth, that prioritizes things like urban forestry and other solutions to mitigate the urban heat island effect. The World Bank is committed to working with cities and partners in the pursuit of thriving and livable cities. We hope that you find the results of these reports presented today useful in your own thinking about climate and urban heat initiatives in your own cities. And we look forward to working with you in your efforts to tackle these challenges. Thank you very much.
Anna Wellenstein, our Regional Director for Sustainable Development. Now, let me just introduce the program this afternoon. First, we'll have presentation by Ms. Megha Mukim, Senior Urban Economist of the World Bank, and then we'll hear from Mark Roberts, a lead economist of the World Bank, who are both authors of the Thriving Report. Following Megha's presentation, following the presentations, we will have a question and answer session, and then a short coffee break. And after the coffee break, we will have a panel discussion. At this time, let me invite Megha to the stage. Yes, Megha.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. Let me thank the organizers and especially the city of Yokohama for inviting me back to Japan. It's been 6 years and it's really a pleasure to be back in the country and to be sharing this report with you. I just want to give a shout out to my colleague, Mark Roberts. This was work that was jointly led. And I believe you have the report on your tables. So this is the report, the one with the green cover called Thriving, that I'll be presenting today. So the title of the report is Thriving, Making Cities Green, More Resilient, and More Inclusive in a World of a Changing Climate. Before I start, I just want to point out that the World Bank senior management has been very much in the forefront of this report. It was launched at COP27 last year, and it generated a lot of interest. And we believe this is indicative of the World Bank's commitment to this very important topic, and helping our clients in cities and subnational clients in the world to actually be able to tackle the challenges of climate change as they come down the line. So the report has two main objectives. The first objective of the report is to have empirical evidence to see how climate change is going to be affecting cities, and in turn, how urban development is going to be affecting the climate. The second big objective of the report is what to do about it, to be able to provide a policy compass for our clients to be able to thrive in a world of a changing climate. So let me start with the first part of the report, the empirical evidence. And we'll start by asking the question, how green, how resilient, and how inclusive are cities today? As Anna mentioned in her opening remarks, we use data on 10,000 cities globally, and we create a global typology of cities ranging from small, medium, and large across lower, middle income, and high income countries to understand how climate change is affecting cities. We also look at cities, 3,000 cities in the East Asia and Pacific region. And what I'm going to do today is to focus a little bit of the remarks on the findings that we have on the East Asia Pacific region, and share with you some of the key findings that we have from the first part, which is the empirical evidence of the report. Before I get into the findings, one thing to note is that over the last couple of years, basically over the last 20 to 60 years, urban growth in East Asia has doubled over time. Urban population has doubled over time. And over the same period, GDP has actually quadrupled over that same period. So what that tells you is that urban growth has been accompanied by increasing GDP in the region. If you look into the future, between now and 2050, 25% of the global growth in urban population is also going to be in East Asia. That essentially tells us that East Asia and cities in East Asia are going to be very important in terms of growing urbanization in the future. The first key finding is that the success, the growth of urban population and the growth of GDP has not been costless. It has come with increasing GHG emissions. We find that EAP is now accounting for about 53% of the world's global urban CO2 emissions on a production basis. A lot of those emissions actually are coming from the upper middle income and the higher income cities in EAP, which are essentially cities that are in Japan and cities that are in China. However, that is not to say that lower income cities in East Asia or lower middle income cities in East Asia shouldn't be paying attention to what is happening in terms of global emissions. When we looked at the global report, that is our 10,000 cities, we actually found that if those cities, the lower income cities, were not making any progress on GHG emissions, they would be very hard to meet the 2050 target of net zero globally. And so it's very important for the lower income countries, cities in East Asia to also continue to make progress on reducing GHG emissions over time. And I'll give you several reasons for why this is important for the cities themselves beyond a global public good perspective. We find that EAP cities on average are less compact and compactness matters. From our global analysis, we find that cities that are more compact are cities that also have lower GHG emissions. We find for the 3,000 cities in East Asia that lack of compactness, that is, cities that are less compact, are also cities that have more CO2 emissions from transport. Now, why does this matter? Well, it turns out that CO2 emissions are also strongly correlated with PM 2.5 emissions. And that matters because PM 2.5 concentrations in East Asian cities are already dangerously very, very high. So, to come full circle, we care about compactness because compactness is good for reducing or is associated with lower emissions, whether it's emissions for CO2 emissions or it's emissions that are related to PM 2.5 emissions. And this is something that we're not seeing in our cities in East Asia from the general the average results that we find from the 3,000 cities in East Asia. Let me turn to the second big finding. From the global report, we found that although it is middle and higher income cities globally that seem to be creating most of the GHG emissions, it is the reverse. It is lower income cities in lower income countries that are expected to face the highest projected impacts of climate change. So we created a composite index that looks at 6 climate hazards together. And we found that when we look at the composite of the 6 hazards, that it's really cities in lower-income countries that are going to be most affected. Now, turning to lower-income cities in East Asia, we find the same. We find that it's going to be cities that are in lower-income and lower-middle-income countries that are going to be most affected by the impacts, by the projected impacts of climate change in the future. As you see on the side, 6 of those are in EAP for floods and 10 for tropical cyclones. So that gives you a sense of the type of climate change hazards that are going to be affecting these cities going forward. We also find that cities in EAP are going to be increasingly exposed to high-intensity events, hot and dry. And Mark is going to speak a little bit later on the hot events. But it turns out that both hot and dry events are going to be affecting EAP cities. We also find that in terms of rainfall, this has been increasing. So annual precipitation over time, over the last 60 years, that's what the graph shows you, has been increasing in EAP cities, making places that are already humid even more humid. And what's more important, it's not just the average increase in rainfall, but it's also the bursts with which the rainfall is going to be hitting EAP cities. So you're going to see an increase of high-intensity anomalies when it comes to wet weather events in EAP cities. The third main finding, and I'm going to switch over to the policy recommendations to make sure that we have enough time for the Q&A. But one main finding to highlight with you is that we look at not only what cities are doing in terms of how green they are, in terms of what they are doing in terms of emissions, how resilient they are in terms of how climate change hazards are going to be impacting cities, but also how inclusive they are. And we find that there's a lack of inclusion in EAP cities. And when I say inclusion, I'm essentially talking about poverty, lack of inclusiveness in terms of prosperity, and also in terms of access to markets and access to services. So when we look at the lack of inclusion, cities in EAP that are less inclusive are also the ones that are less likely to be able to handle the impacts of climate change. In other words, when you have lack of inclusion, it erodes the ability of these cities to be more resilient in the face of a changing climate. All right, so let me stop here and change tracks a bit. I spoke a little bit about what is it that we know about how climate change might be impacting cities. Let me talk a little bit about what is it that we can do. What is it that our client cities, whether in low-income, middle-income, or high-income countries, can do to respond to the challenges of a changing climate? In other words, how they're going to thrive, knowing the challenges that are going to come down the line. So in the report, we essentially think of, we discuss this in three main parts. The first part is what can be done. What are the policies that cities can deploy to be able to tackle these challenges coming down the line? The second part is who does it? Who are the policymakers that are going to be tasked with responding to the challenges? And then thirdly, how does it get done? How do you actually utilize the resources? How do you choose and prioritize between the different policies to be able to respond to a changing climate? And I'm going to go over these three parts bit by bit. So the first part is what are the choices? So when we were doing this report, we came up with a five-part, with the 5 I's, a simpler way for our policymakers and for our readers to be able to grasp the different policy mechanisms that you might have to be able to respond. So the first I is information. And this is basically policymakers require information to be able to inform the decision of households, of firms, of local governments, of national governments to drive changes on the ground. You could think of information as big chunks of information like early warning systems, but you could also think of information as very fine-grained information that is being provided, like building codes going forward. The second I is incentives. So no matter how much information you can provide, you still might not be able to have the right decision-making process. We find that incentives are really important to drive the decisions that need to be made. We looked at some case studies and work that was done in Egypt, and we found that incentives can actually have very, very high returns and sometimes very low costs. For example, in Egypt, they essentially put forward policies that aim to reduce congestion and reduce pollution within the city in Cairo, and that actually came with very high returns in terms of the municipal finance, the budgets, but also in terms of the climate objectives that they were able to reach. The third I in it is insurance, and this is essentially about being able to use fiscal incentives to be able to help households, to help firms, to be able to respond to the climate shocks that they face. We find that the markets for insurance in many of our clients in our lower and middle income countries are less well developed. And there are many different ways in which insurance could be deployed, even when there isn't a market option that is available, using local government incentives and national government incentives to be able to help firms and households to be able to respond to the shocks. The fourth I is integration. Integration refers both within city, looking at compactness of cities. And as I mentioned before, compactness matters because it makes it easier to deliver services, so it's more efficient for public service delivery, but it's also better in terms of your climate objectives. But we also look at integration across cities. So how is it that you connect cities with one another, and how do you connect cities with their rural hinterlands or their rural agricultural markets as well? And then the last I, which is usually the obvious one, is investments. And with investments, we're thinking about investments that could help to prevent, investments that could help to anticipate, investments that could help to respond to the impacts of climate. Many of you already use these investments. You could think about investments in flood control measures, in environmental buffers. Think about investments in roads that guide urban growth away from high-risk areas. In terms of mitigation, think about investments in energy retrofit of buildings and so on. The report that you have is a summary report. It has some of these examples under each of the 5 I's, but the main report also is peppered with many of these examples from our clients and what other countries have done for different typologies of cities, if that's of interest. Who makes the choices? Let me ask, who in the room has small children? Okay, well, anyway, when I had my children in the beginning, I had CPR training, and CPR training teaches you that CPR for adults, which is performed like this, is not the same as CPR for children, which is performed like this. And the reason for that is that children are not small adults. In the same way, cities are not small countries. The way that we respond to cities, the policy space or the wedge that is available to cities and local governments to be able to respond to their challenges is very different from the policy wedge that is available to national governments. We call this the mayor's wedge, which is essentially a way of thinking about the actions that mayors can carry out and how they can crowd in actions from other stakeholders. These could be non-state stakeholders like communities themselves, NGOs, and of course the private sector, or other state stakeholders, which could be other local governments, state governments, provincial governments, national governments, and so on. And then the last part is, how do you get this done? We think that some of the actions that we're talking about are going to be common to all typologies of cities. For instance, how do you green? Even if you're a city that's focused a lot more on resilience or on improving inclusion, if you were to follow a business as usual approach to growth, there would be very high costs to then to being greener in the future. Building retrofits is a classic example of this. It's much cheaper to have energy efficiency buildings or seismic resilient buildings up front than it is to then go later and retrofit these buildings. So there's a lot of part dependence in the investments that you're going to make. Or if you were much more focused on increasing resilience, some cities are going to be far more affected by climate change, as I mentioned above, in terms of the projected changes, but there's going to be no city that is going to be unaffected by climate change. A lot of those impacts are going to be direct, but many of those impacts are also going to be indirect. So all cities are going to be focused on how to deal with increasing resilience over time. Or the third one is how to increase or further improve inclusion of cities. We know that there's going to be parts of the world that are more vulnerable, or places that are more vulnerable, or people that are more vulnerable that are going to be affected by climate change. And these are the people who are less able to mitigate the effects of climate change. So they're really the ones who bear the brunt of the shocks that they face. But I also want to make sure, especially in the EAP region, that poor people and poor places are also found in rich countries. At some point, Mark and I did an online blog, and we basically, there was a podcast, and the person who spoke before us was the CEO of the city of Sydney in Australia, and she said something that really struck us, and she said, no politician, no mayor goes out on election day and says, oh, gee, the emissions are down today. And so a lot of the cities really focus on fostering resilience and fostering inclusion, because this is often in places that are poor. The citizens themselves, the households and the firms are much more focused on access to basic services, on reduction of poverty, and so on. And so we understand that it's important to account for the differences in terms of what it is that cities and their citizens are focusing on going forward. And so there are bundles of policy instruments that you can use. The question that we're asking is, how do you as a policymaker, how do you think about using the different 5 I's. How do you bring them together? How do you prioritize them? How do you sequence them given the problems that you're facing? And so we're trying to come up with a typology of different types of cities that are facing different types of challenges and how they might make trade-offs when they're choosing between the different policies, and then try and toggle together the different options to come up with the 5 I's. And again, I would encourage you to read the report, because we do provide examples of how the cities themselves have to contend with trade-offs, and in some case they can try and maximize the co-benefits that they have from the policy objectives that they're trying to meet. One of the things to take away from the report is that we believe that cities can thrive in a world of a changing climate. They can become greener, they can improve their resilience, and they can become more inclusive going forward. A favorite example for us is an example where we see in many of our client cities that households are often forced to make an unpalatable choice between choosing the location of where they live. They might have to choose between a location that gives them better access to opportunities, whether it's public services or jobs, and choosing between living in a safer neighborhood. And we think this is an unpalatable choice. However, as a policymaker, if you have better urban planning and you have better access to services, better access to jobs, that eases the choice for households and firms between they can then have access to jobs and public services, and they get to bring up their families in safer neighborhoods. So there is a way where you could have the co-benefits of being more green, of being more resilient, and being more inclusive going forward. So essentially in the report, we provide a policy compass that will help our clients make these decisions over time. Let me stop here and thank you warmly for your attention, and look forward very much to any examples that you have to bring from your client cities, and of course also open to any questions you might have. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mega. Now we can have maybe 2 questions from the audience, if there's any question on Mega's presentation. No? In that case, may I invite Mark to proceed with the next presentation on the urban heat report. Mark. Yeah, that's good. Oh, no, let's go.
Okay, so thank you very much. So it's a real pleasure to be here today to present to you an overview of key findings from our new World Bank report, which is called Livable, what the urban heat island effect means for East Asia's cities. And so this is the red report, which is in front of you here, to accompany the first report on thriving. I can really think of no better place to be than Yokohama to launch this report, given Japan's own experience of dealing with extreme urban heat, including through, for example, the development of very advanced early heat wave warning systems. It's also very appropriate given the high-level representation of cities from across East Asia in this session. Because as we'll see, there's plenty of actions that cities can undertake at a local level to help mitigate the urban heat island effect, and more generally help deal with the extreme urban heat challenge. Now, as we all know, 2023 has been a year of record temperatures globally, and also in East Asia. Here in Japan, in June, a new temperature record in excess of 41 degrees Celsius was set. However, it's not only Japan. China, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam have all seen record temperatures this year. Now, of course, these record temperatures have been driven to a large extent by climate change. However, climate change is not the only reason why so many of East Asia's cities are so hot. The urban heat island effect also contributes to making cities hotter, than the surrounding rural areas, and therefore making urban heat waves more likely. And just like climate change, the urban heat island effect is a man-made phenomenon. It comes from the relative lack of vegetation in cities compared to surrounding rural areas, as well as the greater prevalence of impervious surface areas, such as roads, tarmac, concrete, and so forth that we see in cities. So against this backdrop, the report in front of you today aims to answer three key questions. The first key question is, how strong is the urban heat island effect in East Asia? The second key question is, why should city leaders, policymakers in the region worry about extreme urban heat from the combination of the urban heat island effect and climate change? And the third and final key question is, what can city leaders do to address the extreme urban heat challenge? So to start with the first question, how strong is the urban heat island effect in East Asian cities? To answer this question, we analysed satellite data on land surface temperatures for 100 cities that together cover a combined population of 417 million people, a very significant proportion of population in East Asia. And what the data shows is that on average, land surface temperatures for these 100 cities are 1.6 degrees Celsius higher than surrounding rural areas within 2 kilometers and 2 degrees Celsius warmer than rural areas within 10 kilometers. So that's quite a difference. We also observed that hidden behind these averages, there's large variation across cities in the intensity of the urban heat island effect, going from near zero to for a maximum of up to 6.6 degrees Celsius difference because of the urban heat island effect. We also see that the urban heat island effect tends to be stronger at night, which can add to thermal discomfort during the night, which has impacts on health. And this is because the heat that gets stored in the built environment during the day gets slowly released after sunset. And urban heat island effects are a particular concern for hot and humid tropical cities within the region. This is because the natural processes, such as convection, that help to cool cities down, don't work as well under humid conditions. And it's partly for this reason that in our data, we see some of the strongest urban heat island effects in cities in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in the Philippines. Humid conditions also inhibit the body's natural processes for cooling itself down. Under very humid conditions, it's more difficult for sweat to evaporate and therefore cool down the human body. We also see in the data that heat stress is often stronger and has been increasing more rapidly in recent decades for cities in lower income countries in East Asia compared to cities in higher income countries. Again, a big part of the reason for this is that many of those cities have hot and humid baseline climates to begin with. Now, not only do we see wide variations in the strength of the urban heat island effect across cities, but also across neighborhoods within individual cities. A good example of this is Bandung. Bandung is Indonesia's second largest city. During the summer of 2022, we did field work on the ground to take air temperature readings throughout the city. In doing so, we found that there's up to 7 degrees Celsius temperature difference between the hottest and the coolest neighborhoods in the early evening. But this is not unique to Bandung. This is common across many cities in the world, these large temperature differentials within cities. Now, looking forward, we need to be particularly concerned by the interaction of the urban heat island effect with climate change, which is only going to intensify the extreme urban heat challenge. Already, many cities in East Asia face very high frequencies of extremely hot months, hot events, as we see on the map here. And this is only going to worsen with climate change. So we undertook urban climate modeling for a number of cities in the report, including for Phnom Penh in Cambodia, Cambodia's capital. And we see, according to this modeling, already there's a nighttime urban heat island effect in Phnom Penh of 2.5 degrees Celsius. And this urban heat island effect contributes to between 23 to 25 heat wave days per year in Phnom Penh central districts. That compares to only 2 to 3 heat wave days per year in the more outlying areas of the city, where you've got leafier neighborhoods and there's greater spaces between buildings in terms of urban development. However, fast forward to 2050. Even under an optimistic climate change scenario, this interaction of the urban heat island effect with global climate change will see an increase in the number of heat wave days in the city's central districts to 40 per year. Under a pessimistic climate change scenario, the situation will be even worse. There will be 60 heat wave days per year in the central districts. Now, the more outlying neighborhoods of the city will not be immune to climate change, of course. Nevertheless, because the urban heat island effect isn't as intense, the projected number of heat wave days is going to be 1/3 lower from those climate conditions. So this brings me to the second key question. Why should policymakers worry about extreme urban heat due to the urban heat island effect and due to climate change? Well, first of all, extreme heat threatens the economic competitiveness of cities. So according to one study that looked at large cities globally, the projected median loss in GDP due to the combination of the urban heat island effect and climate change by the middle of the century will be between 1.4 and 1.7% of GDP. For the worst affected city, it's going to be up to 11% of GDP. That's a significant loss of income by the end of the century. And significantly, the GDP losses due to the combination of the urban heat island effect and climate change are 2.6 times the projected losses due to climate change by itself. In the report, we also present evidence of the impacts of extreme heat events on local economic activity for cities across East Asia. And we find large negative impacts of heat wave events on local economic activity for two types of city. The first type of city are large metropolitan areas within Southeast Asia. The second type of city are cities in the rest of East Asia that have warmer baseline climates. Now, extreme heat not only impacts your economic competitiveness, it also impacts learning outcomes, the health of residents, and the livability of cities. And so this graph shows results in terms of the impact of extremely hot days on test scores in the Chinese National College entrance examination, a very important examination. So above 20 degrees Celsius, we see that higher temperatures lead to worse student performance on the Chinese National College entrance exams. And these impacts are very significant. For example, at a temperature of between 28 to 30 degrees Celsius, you see a 2% reduction in the test scores of students. Now, extreme heat obviously also has significant health impacts through a variety of different mechanisms that are listed on the slide. And these negative health impacts contribute currently to up to 100,000 deaths per year in the East Asia region, so a significant loss of life. And these numbers are projected to increase looking into the future as cities become even hotter over time, and we've got more mortality related to heat-related causes. Extreme heat also impacts the inclusiveness of cities. So in many cities, the hottest neighborhoods are also the poorest neighborhoods. In part, this is because wealthier households, richer households can afford to live in more pleasant parts of a city that have more greenery, have more vegetation, amongst other things. And again, we see, for the example of Bandung, but very common to other cities in the region, there's a strong positive correlation between the poverty rate of a neighborhood and the afternoon temperature. So the poorest neighborhoods are getting more exposure to extreme urban heat because of stronger urban heat island effects in those neighborhoods. Now, it's not only the poor that are more vulnerable to extreme urban heat, but also the elderly and people with other underlying health conditions. And this is very significant because much of East Asia, parts of East Asia, are already facing a silver tsunami in terms of a growing share of the population that's over the age of 65. And for countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, Mongolia, over the next 30 years, there's a projected tripling or quadrupling of the size of the population over the age of 65. So we're going to have more people in this highly vulnerable group in terms of the negative health impacts of extreme urban heat. So this brings us to the question of, okay, what can cities do about this problem, the challenge of extreme urban heat? Now, the first point we make in the report on this, the policy side, is that air conditioning is not the solution, it's not a panacea to this problem. Air conditioning has been described as a maladaptation to extreme urban heat, and this is for a number of reasons. Air conditioning cannot be afforded by everyone, first of all. Secondly, air conditioning actually transfers heat from inside buildings to outside buildings. In doing so, it further exacerbates the urban heat island effect. Of course, air conditioning needs energy, and that energy use can contribute to carbon dioxide emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, therefore fueling further climate change and generating a vicious cycle of increased AC use, cities getting warmer, feeding back to stronger urban heat island effects as well. So instead, in the report, we present a number of different strategies that cities can adopt to rise to the extreme urban heat challenges under a places, people, and institutions framework for urban heat resilience. So the first strategy is a place-based strategy, and this is to advance urban greening through strategic planning in cities. For example, urban forestry programs. Not only are trees, shrubs, vegetation one of the characteristics of cities that can have the greatest physical impact in terms of cooling down temperatures, but it's also something that's under the control of local policymakers, again, through the initiation, for example, of urban forestry programs. And we do observe that across the cities in East Asia, cities with more vegetation have less intense urban heat island effects. A second strategy, also a place-based strategy, is to cool city spaces through the taking advantage of wind, shade, and through better urban design. So better urban design can include guidelines to have stepped-back buildings, which promotes wind flow, to have designated breezeways in cities, to have building arrangements that help to channel wind throughout a city, creating cooling breezes. We can also think of covered walkways. If you visited Singapore, there's a whole network of such covered walkways as well as awnings, and the restoration and preservation of a city's blue assets, lakes, ponds, other water features. And water has also a significant cooling effect. within cities, particularly if you're a coastal city and you want to take advantage of the breezes coming from the ocean. Now, a third strategy is thinking about indoor heat as well as outdoor heat. And so there's a need to engage building owners to tackle indoor heat. And this can be done through a variety of measures, including both hard measures, such as mandatory building regulations that specify, for example, reflectivity values for roof covering materials, so they're more reflective of the heat. Something as simple as the color of the paint, white paint as opposed to black paint. And there are also softer measures, such as providing building owners with information about effective cooling strategies that don't involve air conditioning, as well as the use of incentives. So you can think, for example, of the granting of floor area bonuses for developers who adhere to green building standards. Cities can also lead by example in terms of the buildings that they own and operate. So on the Site 1A visit tour yesterday, one of the buildings that we went to was the Yokohama City Hall, and we saw examples of the city using innovative solutions without air conditioning to help cool down the building. But cities can also lead by example in terms of the schools that the city operates, all the public spaces, sports facilities, and so forth. And in doing so, they not only lead by example, but also help to create information on what works and what doesn't work in terms of non-mechanical cooling solutions. And it also helps to build construction industry capacity in terms of implementing those solutions. Now, a further strategy relates to the fact that many heatwave deaths are both predictable and preventable. And so this means through the implementation of effective early heatwave warning systems, you can considerably reduce the mortality that occurs during heat waves. And again, Japan is a good example of the implementation of such heatwave early warning systems. Our effective system not only announces the existence of dangerously high temperatures, but predicts the risks associated with those temperatures and will activate targeted interventions towards vulnerable groups of the population, such as the elderly. And the evidence shows not only for Japan, but for other cities around the world, including, for example, Hong Kong, in the region, that these systems can have a significant return in terms of the impacts on reducing heatwave-related deaths. A further strategy is to protect the workers who are most exposed to heat. So this includes workers in heat-exposed outdoor jobs. Think of construction workers, think of street traders or vendors, think of waste pickers. But it also includes workers in heat-exposed indoor jobs. So jobs in manufacturing, for instance, that involve multiple sources of indoor heat, as well as potentially buildings that might lack proper ventilation, might even lack air conditioning. Those workers are more vulnerable to the impacts of extreme urban heat. And the interventions here can include, for example, during heat waves, providing outdoor workers with access to cooling centres that have air conditioning during a heat wave. It can include very simple measures, such as the distribution of drinking water to workers, as well as even stopping work during the very hottest hours, where you've got danger of negative health impacts. And the final strategy I want to mention sort of underlies all of the other strategies, and this is the need to really mainstream heat risk reduction into city institutions and more general strategies. And this can involve, one way to do this is to elevate the extreme heat response to a senior official level within local government. For example, a number of cities around the world have taken the step of appointing a chief heat officer. And by elevating the extreme heat response to a more senior official level, this helps to manage the interventions across different physical scales, from the specification of standards for building materials at quite a micro level, to the incorporation of green and blue elements into area-wide plans. It can also help in the utilization of diverse policy instruments, of which there are many, in terms of tackling the urban heat island effect and dealing with extreme urban heat, and crucially to be able to coordinate and manage across the diverse agencies whose participation is required to have an effective response to extreme urban heat, from planning and parks departments to transit operators to health systems. So let me just leave you with one perhaps obvious thought, but I think it's kind of worth restating. Obviously, cities are facing a challenge from extreme urban heat, from the combination of the urban heat island effect and climate change. But we all know that climate change is a global problem that local solutions alone cannot address. However, the urban heat island effect is a local problem with local solutions that city leaders can make a real difference on. So thank you very much. Look forward to any questions. I'm looking forward very much to the panel discussion. I hope you enjoyed the report, and it will also be available online in the coming few weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. We can have a few questions from the audience. Yes, please. Please identify yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon. Seems like developing countries like the Philippines bear the brunt of the effects of climate change. Take the case of sea level rise, 3.5 meters in our country in about 100 years. Those are the projections. But talking about, but that's one difficult thing to address, no, in our island communities like in Cebu. But we're talking about the urban heat island effect. In Cebu, where the city planning office is like trying to address this particular problem, we have mass transit routes, which to our mind are areas where tall buildings are constructed because they have to get the value of the land. Okay, so these mass transit routes are going north to south, but there are wind flows we call the northeast wind in local dialect is the amihan. The southwest wind is called habagat. So we are trying to arrange our buildings because there are currently applications for 40 to 50-story buildings, which will eventually make the city very hot. In fact, now we are feeling the effects of this urban heat island effect, a 2-degree difference from our urban area to the hillside, 2 degrees Celsius. So my question is really, are there existing studies or actual measures on the use of these natural wind flows to self-cool down urban areas like what we can emulate?
Thank you. Maybe collect 1 or 2 more questions, and we can ask Mark and Mega to respond. No? Okay, Mark, Mega?
Yeah, thank you very much on the question. I mean, it's interesting to hear the actions you're undertaking and thinking about in terms of addressing the urban heat island effect. I think there's a growing international evidence base in terms of the impacts of different types of interventions, including greening strategies, including sort of trying to orientate your kind of building patterns to promote breeze throughout the city. And so I think it would be useful maybe to exchange contact details so I can kind of share some of those references with you as well. I mean, we are seeing increasing action in this space from cities globally that we're interacting with our clients as well, thinking about these issues and thinking about these types of strategies. I mean, it does depend a little bit on kind of local conditions in terms of which solutions are most effective. So, for example, if you're certain cities, given climatic conditions, urban greening might not be as effective a solution. Whereas if you're a coastal city, you can, for example, make more use of the sea breezes that are coming. And so it's not one size fits all. So I think that is important as well, thinking about some of the evidence, whether or not that evidence applies to your city, and looking at comparable cases as well. But yeah, let's definitely exchange contact details, and I'll aim to share some of the evidence base with you.
Any other question? If none, then let's have a 15-minute break. Have coffee, some snacks there, and then we'll resume with the panel discussion in 15 minutes. So this part of the program, we will have a panel discussion. We have invited some of our participating cities as discussants to react to the findings of the two reports and to exchange views on how cities can better address issues of extreme urban heat and other climate change issues. But first, let me introduce the moderator of the panel discussion, Mr. Ming Jiang, who is the Practice Manager for Urban Development and Disaster Risk Management for East Asia Pacific region of the World Bank. And let me introduce the discussants. We have first Mayor Benjamin Magalong, Mayor of Baguio City in the Philippines. So Mayor Benji is a retired Police Director General and spent 38 years in the police force. After that, he joined the private sector and took a post in the Steel Asia Corporation as Senior Vice President. And he was a member of the Board of Directors of the Philippine National Oil Corporation. He has started his political career with the goal of rehabilitating and revive the city of Baguio. So this is Mayor Benji Magalong. We also have Dr. Kemuro, the Director General of the Ministry of Land Management, Urban Planning and Construction of Cambodia. He has extensive experience on land management, urban development and management, as well as city planning, and provided a number of, he's also a lecturer in various universities. He has worked as a freelance consultant to the bank, ADB, World Vision, among others. So that's Dr. Kemuro. We also have Mr. Toru Hashimoto. Maybe you've seen him before. Toru is the Director General of the International Affairs Bureau at City of Yokohama. He's in charge of the Yokohama Partnership for Resources and Technologies, or YPORT, that aims to deliver knowledge and cutting-edge technology for urban solutions. Prior to joining the City of Yokohama, Toru took technical and managerial posts at the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank Institute. Last but not least, Mr. Helmi Budiman is the head of the Development Planning Agency of the Makassar government. He has extensive experience working in government and held previously positions, managerial positions dealing with issues of budget, regional finances, and asset management. So, Ming, please.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, everyone, for attending and for traveling all the way from around different parts of Asia and the Pacific to Yokohama, and we have been learning a lot yesterday and today. So I'm very happy that I'm going to moderate this session to discuss some of the issues that were raised in the last panel, in the two presentations of the two books. You know, it's a green book and the orange book, and it's actually, these two are the overviews, the executive summaries. I think Mega and Mark didn't mention they're actually full books, like a much thicker to read, but these are the overviews. So I hope these are the issues that resonate with the countries and with the cities that they are facing. So I'm very happy that in this hour we have the panelists who are actually doing things on the ground to address some of the issues, and we can have that discussion. So just first, I just remind myself and to everyone that we need to finish the session 3:30. We're going to be the meeting room is going to be used for other purpose, so we can, I know these issues we can discuss kind of continue for a long time. So just a timekeeper for ourselves that we only have until 3:30. So what I think we'll do is maybe I'll ask, have 2 rounds of sort of exchange on the issues related to this. And then I hope we can have a little bit more time that can open to the floor. Okay, so let's see how. My job is a timekeeper, and usually 50% of the time I fail this. I hope I can do a better job this time. So maybe I can ask the first round of first question. So with these 2 presentations, especially on the thriving cities, on the broad green inclusive development for cities, and particularly the second, the orange one, on the urban heat island, a lot of issues. How, as mayor, city officials, or national government officials, how do you see these issues affect your cities, or particular, urban heat and other climate change related effect? How do you see that affect you? And then what are some of the actions that you have been taking to addressing these challenges? Maybe I can start with Mayor Benji of Baguio City.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ming. There are 5 areas that I see that will be highly impacted by urban heat island. One is health. Second is education. Third is business. Fourth is environment. And another is tourism, because tourism is actually the 3rd driver of our economy. Now, before I get into the details, let me just give you some idea of what Baguio is all about. Baguio is the highest city in the entire country at 1,500 meters. It's the summer capital for the simple reason that it has the coolest weather in the entire city, with a range of about 15 degrees to about 25 degrees all year round. And we go as low as 8 degrees during the cold season, and that's from December to March. So a lot of people go up to Baguio just to feel the cool weather, and at the same time to feel get a scent of our pine trees. So Baguio is well known as the summer capital of the Philippines. We have about 378,000 population. But our growing population, our daytime population, is about 650,000. We have about 78,000 students, considering the fact that it's the center of education in the Philippines, north of the Philippines. So I mentioned about its impact on health, and considering the fact that it will exacerbate cardiovascular and respiratory diseases among our vulnerable sector. And these are the elders, which comprises about 9% of a total population, translated into about 34,000 people. And of course, the children, younger age, at the range of about 0 to 14, we're looking at about 23% of our population, which would translate to about 87,000 people. So another is business. Business is mainly dependent on tourism. And again, with a higher temperature, definitely that would impact higher energy cost and higher operational cost. So another is education. Probably we have only 95% of the total number of classrooms do not have air conditioning, considering the fact that we have a centralized air conditioning unit in the city of Baguio, so to speak. But students are not used to having air-conditioned rooms, considering the cool weather in the city of Baguio. And once we have this increase in temperature, then our students will have a difficult time studying, taking their tests, considering that there's a direct correlation between higher performance in examinations as against higher temperature. Another is tourism. As I mentioned to you, people are coming up to the city of Baguio because of the cool weather. And once our weather our temperature gets increases, then there's no motivation for tourists to come up to the city of Baguio. And we're looking at about, in 2019, the total number of tourists was around 1.9 million. And we're expecting that in 2025, the total number of tourist arrivals in the city of Baguio would range about 3.2 to 3.5 million people. So that's a big revenue for the entire city, and that would hugely have a great impact on our economy if we'll have an increase in temperature. Just would like to inform you that sometime in terms of environment, sometime in 2014 to 2019, we conducted a year-on-year study because we were really surprised why there was a 1.8 degrees centigrade increase in our temperature. And we found out that between those two, between that period, 2014, 2019, early 2019, we lost about 52 hectares of green and forest cover in the entire city of Baguio. And that was one of the contributors, major factors why we have a 1.8 increase in our temperature. And that's the reason why what we're doing now is we have all this urban forestry management plan. We're in every year we do a 4-month tree planting period, and we're now mixing both pine trees and endemic trees. We also found out that an increase in temperature would impact the growth of our pine trees because the pine trees grow as the range of about 60 degrees centigrade to 80 degrees centigrade. And any increase in temperature higher than the 80 degrees centigrade would have a impact on the survivability of our pine trees. In fact, they will be susceptible to diseases, and especially now that we are also experiencing their bark beetle infestation. I learned that there was a study conducted that bark beetle would be they have a higher survival in hot weather. And this is one of the biggest threat now that's threatening our pine trees in the city of Baguio. So we have this tree planting. At the same time, we are now making sure that our development in the city of Baguio is more on the vertical development rather than sprawling, so that we will be able to maintain the 79-21 ratio, meaning 79 would represent green and forest cover, and 21% would represent build-up areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Benji. Very, very interesting. I want to highlight just a couple of things I really get from, you mentioned the greening. That's important for not only just for the reducing the heat, but it's also really preserve the environment and continue to promote the tourism industry. Yeah. So I think economic growth. So I found that one of the things is a lot of the measures we do are not just one benefit. You put the greening, you reduce the urban heat, but it's also good for tourism development, good for the growth. You look at the heat issues and the school you mentioned, most of the classrooms don't have ACs. So cooling is also good for education, the benefits. So all these things quite often are together. It's not just one thing. So urban heat is also part of the sort of broad thing. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Benji. Maybe Dr. Kamro, you overseeing urban development in the whole Cambodia, many different cities. What's your take on this?
Hello. First, on behalf of the Cambodian delegate, I would like to thank the World Bank for the opportunity to be here, especially to be sitting in this panel. I also would like to thank the city of Yokohama and her people for the hospitality. Thank you. I'm not from the local government. I'm representing the Ministry of Land Management, Urban Planning and Construction, the national government of Cambodia. I would like to share 2 points in regard to climate change and urban heat island. As a policy maker, we have looked at our city into 3 categories. If we prepare policy planning, first, the size of the city. We have classified basically city into large, medium, and small size cities. Second, we look at the economic role of the city, or let's say economic function of the city, because size, geographical location, connectivity represent different city economic roles. Third, we look at the geographical location of the city where they situated, because the location also represent different climate change and also the heat wave. Yeah. For example, Phnom Penh, the capital city of Cambodia, the function of the city have shifted from manufacturing to service-based industry. That also means more traffic concentrated in business district, in some of the small town of the city itself. That also create more heat island. And I thank to Mark who shared the presentation on the heat island of Phnom Penh. Then we look at some other cities, small and medium-sized city, because those medium-sized city has attract different kind of economic activities, and it generate different kind of heat island. For the small-sized city, sometimes we have been able to attract service, something like tourist-related industry. So the heat issues with those different size cities are representing based on their role, based on their population, based on their economic activity. With that, what have I seen as an impact of heat island toward our population? First, I think that there's no different impact from city to city or from country to countries. The impact on health and productivity, mostly on the elderly and the children. And our colleague from the mayor from the Philippines have raised that children most suffer during the summer, during their schooling. So, of course, the productivity of the education of the children will decrease. Sometimes we have to encourage schooling shift from very early morning and end very early midday, and then start late afternoon, and then end a little bit late afternoon as well, just in order to cope the heat wave. But that's not easy to implement, because it also related to the traffic jam of the city as well. So we have to study city movement in regard to that issue as well. In our draft policy, we also would like to propose different type of working time for different institutions. That's what the government can do, because it belongs to the government, and the government can enforce on their regulation. For example, maybe the Ministry of Land Management should start at work from 7. Ministry of Education, if it is related or close to each other, should start at 7:30. Ministry of Defense should start at 9. And then we have a variety of ending working time. That also help to reduce traffic congestion. At the same time, heat wave also reduced as well. Then it's not easy for private sectors to implement what we call heat island mitigation because it's very costly. And they have to somehow find the source of finance to finance those cooling systems. So in that way, what we can do is to provide some incentive for the business owner. If they have what we call additional cooling plan, probably we will get some incentive in regard to income tax break. But this is in the process of discussion. It's not yet happened. But that's what we see how this business owner can recover from installing cooling system. When we talk about cooling system, it's not only referred to, like Mark said, air conditioning is not a panacea at all. So in a tropical weather like Cambodia, we also encourage them to have what we call a green corridor and a green park within their what we call factory compound. So this also leads to what we are trying to do now, because I would like to share with you that we just have a new government mandate, and the new mandate of the Royal Government of Cambodia in regard to land sector is land management and urban planning. Because we have been able to do that because at the moment, Cambodia have achieved more than 90% of countrywide land registration. With that as a first phase, we will be able to do what we call existing land use planning. Based on that land use planning, we will be able to conduct a countrywide city planning based on the what we call systematic land registration, also involved by the World Bank as well. Thanks to the World Bank again. So for the start of this first question, I would like to stop here. Thank you, Ming.
Thank you, Dr. Camero. I think you mentioned quite a. At least I get, Mega's presentation get the 5 eyes.
Yes.
Or at least I get 2 eyes. They could look at the incentives for the private sector. You look at the integration, urban planning, land management. These are all very part of the very important actions to address the urban heat challenges. Now we go to Pak Helmi from Makassar, Indonesia.
Excuse me. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mrs. Ming. Before I start, I would like to say thank you and my deep appreciation for the World Bank to the invitation being Makassar become one of the speakers in this forum, and also I would like to thank you and to Yokohama City to provide us such a nice city. And then about the extreme urban heat island effect, and mostly in the city of Makassar. So before I start, I would like to introduce you about the Makassar. Makassar is one of among 5 biggest city in Indonesia. Our city is around 145 kilometers, and our population is around 1.5 million people. And then Makassar is also the intricate to the eastern Indonesia. So Makassar is very strategic. And meanwhile, Makassar, we also have the same problem with most of the city island in the world. And then significant impact is all about the water. So as you know, as the rise of the temperature or the urban heat island, most of the water, especially the clean water, is very hard to find in this time. And then also the water is the electricity in our city is produced by the water level. So we have two main issues. So we don't have the water, and also we don't have the electricity. Now in Makassar, we have to shut down every several hours in different area, and then we have to switch on and switch off in many places. And now the citizen of Makassar is doing protests about this. And now after we do some other project, including the water, we provide another water, free water to the citizen, and also we doing incentives to the factory, and then also the citizen about the electrician. We have a solution in this time, even though the solution is a short-term solution. And then after that, this is affect the economic business activity in Makassar. We cannot service provide become optimal, and then the amount of production decrease, and this is also affect the value of income and also the economic of Makassar. So we have several action on the long term that already I said, long term, and also the short term action that we do, such as we do doing some water waste management, and also we do planning on the new water system on the city. So we develop our city to build more infrastructure to provide more service to the citizens. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Helmi. So these are important sort of challenges, water supply, water resources, electricity. I think these are the basic needs. I think it's also many of our cities in Southeast Asia, in the Pacific, still have those challenges. And I think the other thing related to the other eye on the institutional side, these are the things that need a partnership between the city and the national government and other agencies to solve the issues. For example, I think on the electricity side, you need to work with the PLN, the national power company to address the issues. You cannot just work by the city alone. You need that kind of partnership to address the issues. Thanks, Pak Helmi. Now let's come back to Hashimoto-san from Yokohama. Maybe we can ask Hashimoto-san to speak maybe a little bit about how in Yokohama City, how Minato Mirai and Yokohama City, what kind of climate mitigation initiatives you are taking as a leader in this area.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, again. And I'd like to join other panelists as well to say thank you to the World Bank bringing this important session and also launching two important books. And I really appreciate. I already learned a lot by just going through quickly the pages and listen to your presentation. And also thank you to come to Yokohama, and I really feel really excited to see many old friends. I mean, this is after COVID, and this is for us the first time to organize this kind of a conference, a convention after 3 years. So I missed you guys, and I saw many friends, old friends, new friends, and thank you very much. And I think one of the significance of this convention is taking place in Minato Mirai 21. Yes, indeed, this year, the hottest year in Japan and Yokohama, compared to all the record, the hottest. And actually, we feel the impact still that usually this season, our tree, especially the ginkgo tree, am I correct to pronounce ginkgo? Okay, that there's a very nice street in Yokohama. All the ginkgo tree becoming yellow, but still it's green. So there's a problem that we have an autumn festival, and we don't change the timing, we don't change the timing of the festival because we all prepared. But the leaves are still green so that, people stop taking pictures, on the festival. So that we feeling lots of impact. But compared to Tokyo, that I feel this area cooler, even the hottest year in Japan. And I checked the statistics. It's like a 1 degree or 2 degree or sometimes 3 degree cooler than in Tokyo on the same day, especially during the nighttime. I have to mobilize my team to check the real reason for that. But I think there are a few reasons which I'd like to share with you today. Can we start the slide? I prepared the 3 slides, so that it's not a presentation, but the reinforce again. Minasmaya 21, most of you, all of you participate in the opening session, and it was mentioned, this area designated a leading area for the carbon neutrality. I just learned this morning, there is 70 more than 70 areas designated, but when we chosen, there was only 10. One of these 10, that first one. And this area, as you can see from the picture in the below, maybe the picture is not so big, but still you can see lots of green. 24% of this area designated for the green areas. So I'm very happy to share that conversation this morning and afternoon that, many of you, some of you, let's say, jogging in this area, right? And you enjoy the openness. And also that this breeze from the coastal line really helped this area to cool down a bit. And also that it's a little bit difficult to share with this picture, but the height of the building is controlled. Some of you mentioned the first day yesterday in my presentation of introduction, the high building in the back and the low building up front. And this is the lowest building in this area, and I think I was not participating in this decision making of the height control, but I think it is a very significant decision. The reason is, well, people love to create a high building closer to the coast area, right? To monopolize the view, right? Of course. But most precious, most expensive area is designated for green and low-rise building. I think this is a significant decision. If you like to make money out of this development, I think you do that reverse. Coastal line, you set up the very high building, nice view, monopolizing everything. But, the city of Yokohama did not do that. So, and also each lot and a street is wider than in most of the area of Tokyo. Right? You see, and introduction of public transportation, you don't see much car. You can go anywhere by walking or a bike or by car without a traffic jam. So the design of this area is really, we believe, as a Yokohama city, has a lot of significance, implication to your city making. I'm not saying that copy this model. This is our model based on our regulation, financial resources, what we can do. But some element, like how to allocate the green open areas, how to control the building height, and also that each building has its own environmental initiative. And most of the building get a class S under our system of environmental monitoring called a CASP. So that this area is one of the area that putting 1 or 2 or even 3 degrees lower than in central Tokyo as a heat island. Yeah, so this is proven that we have done a bit of success development of the city. Next, please. And also that maybe I have to change myself. Sorry, I got this one. Sorry. Yeah, but central area of the Yokohama does not have enough space to create a renewable energy. So what shall we do? Actually, this is not directly, having an impact to the heat island, but in the long run, we have to lower the emission, carbon neutrality. So there is a 2 initiative, one within the city and one out of the city. Within the city, if you can go to the suburb of Yokohama, actually, we have plenty of green areas, lots of hills, and some area you can observe the green areas. And also that we have some buildings still easy to put some renewable solar panel, for example, the conventional one, so that we are installing this kind of renewable energy outskirts of the city to supply some energy needed within the city core. And also one new technology I just like to mention. I think other session in the downstairs, professor who has developed the new solar seat called perovskite. This is a new structure, and I think it's going to be a market within 2 years. So currently the main production started in Japan and China. I think it's a perovskite. Am I correct? Or perovskite? Yeah, P-E-R-O-V skite. So this new solar seat, it's not a panel anymore. It's very flexible, so that you can put it on the window, or you can even put it on the wind seat of a car. So I think this kind of new technology becoming more of the reality, so that we like to deploy these new technology very soon. And other things which has already started is we are importing the renewable energy from Tohoku region. Tohoku region is the area hit by the earthquake 12 years ago. And then that as a part of their renewable or reconstruction, or how to say, to building up the economy there, that there is lots of renewable energy site being developed into this Tohoku area. And we have a partnership with 17 municipalities within Japan to import renewable energy these areas. So that our effort is a very mini scale in a Minatomirai, of course, then within the citywide and region-wide within Japan. So that's what we are doing. That's one thing I'd like to share with you. Other initiative, or not initiative, or maybe the initiative for the future, this area is being heated and cooled down through the district heating and cooling system, entire area. So that, unfortunately, you cannot have a gas cooking system within this area because there's no gas provision. Or you can put your own air conditioner, yes, of course, but you have to purchase the energy, the heating and the cooling compulsory from this district heating and cooling plant. And this itself is really lowering the energy consumption significantly, more than 10%. But more than that, each building does not have its cooling or heating system, which means that you reduce the heat generating point. When you're walking in the heat island, like in, sorry to say, Tokyo or Washington, D.C. or New York or wherever, sometimes you feel heat from the building because they're generating the heat so that they have to cool down or heat up the building itself. But we don't have that. And more significantly for the future, we are trying to convert energy source from the conventional one into hydrogen. Yeah, this can be possible, feasible, because we have one source of the supply of heat and cool. I'm not saying whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but we have done that. So right now we are going to invest by the city. Also, we are trying to get the national support. Maybe that we are getting support from the bank again, even though we are not eligible as a country, but we think about that, how we can do it, So we are trying to convert entire area is zero emission by converting the energy source to the hydrogen. So, this is a little bit tricky because the supply chain of hydrogen is not well established, even in Japan or in other countries, whether it's going to be developed or not, I'm not so sure. But unless someone take initiative to start the conversion, nothing will happen. So that we decided to start this initiative, and that's Mayor's initiative, that he mentioned the Green Expo today in his opening, that, one of the issue is that we are really materially mobilizing our own energy towards conversion of hydrogen, building up to the 2027, which we like to showcase to the world. Yeah. So this is a few of the examples that we are doing. Lastly, very shortly, other important thing is social awareness. Using your kids. Kid will tell you, Dad, turn off the light. Mom, don't use the water so much. So that's always our success formula. That we educate our children at 6 years old, 12 years old, when they absorb so much thing. Yes, 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 at age. And then so that it was really successful for us to reduce our garbage, reduce the solid waste generation. Right now, our focus now is more towards carbon neutrality. So that, social awareness, especially through the education at a young age, that's what we are doing too. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Hashimoto-san. A lot of interesting things. I just, for me, just the one important is to address these challenges. I think it also provides more opportunities, economic opportunities, business opportunities, that you need innovation, new technology, whether it's a solar seed or whether it's hydrogen, new economic opportunities. I think in the end, to address the climate change, we need a technology change. You need a innovation. That these are the things that will come, and the cities play an important role in the whole initiative. So that's. I found it very, very instructive from the first round of the question. Maybe I have time to have a second round of questioning. Now, maybe the second round is about the challenges. There are a lot of things to do on top of their basic needs, create jobs for people, infrastructure, addressing the climate change impact, a lot of things for the national government and for the mayors and the city government. So to address these, what are the constraints that your cities are facing? What are the constraints, and how do you think what would be needed, both by yourself or by others, from the national government, others, how others sort of can be helpful. So that's what are constraints, and what kind of help that could be useful.
Thank you. Let me first apologize. I forgot to thank World Bank and for inviting us, and Yokohama for the welcoming accommodation. We have identified several constraints. One is the city council, another is budget, third is corruption, which is becoming a big issue in the city of Baguio, and not only in Baguio but in the Philippines, entire Philippines, and of course a centric national government. Now, let me go back to the city council. The problem with the city of Baguio is basically an indigenous people city. And we have about 48 tribes. And the council is made up mostly of elders, because the cultural tradition is that only elders have the right to lead, and only elders have the right to decide. And that is something that I'm now trying to break. And I'm challenging the status quo, trying to bring in more young people into the city council. But one person actually mentioned this, that it was almost perfect until it reached the city council. And that's a challenge to us. There's so much analysis every time we have perfected it. We did our feasibility study, and then it arrives into the city council, considering the fact that most of the members are actually elders that don't have a good idea of what innovation is all about, what resilience is all about, what sustainability is about. So they start to analyze, and they keep on analyzing until it leads to paralysis. So those are one of the challenges. That's one of the challenges that we have to face as city mayor. Another is budget. With limited revenue, of course, we cannot basically pursue all the programs that are related to our climate change action plan. Another is centric government, wherein it will take us months or years to be able to secure, for example, environmental compliance certificate from the different national agencies, permits from the national agencies. And you have to keep on following it up, considering the fact, even although there's now a new program on ease of doing business, but still we have to contend with all of this bureaucratic red tapes and slow processes, especially at the national level. And finally, corruption is now becoming a big issue in the Philippines. And I remember one particular philanthropist from Nigeria who said, if politics is more profitable than industry, if government officials and politicians are richer than entrepreneurs, then that country will never progress because it manufactures poverty. It's a big issue. It's a big constraint now in this country, and we're hoping that the president will do something about it. And unfortunately, only a few are trying to doing their best to speak up about this. When I had the chance to talk to some of the legislators and at the national level, it turned out that corruption results to a radical and dramatic reduction in the budget for a certain project. Let us say, for example, the budget is around 100 million. Because of corruption, what is left for the project ranges from 42 to 55%. And in short, almost 40% to 50% are pocketed by politicians and government officials. And for the city of Baguio, we're now becoming a model of good governance. We have practically erased, I would say, 95% of the corruption in the city of Baguio, and that's the reason why we're now leading a network of local chief executives in the entire country who believes in good governance, who are now raising advocacy against corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Benji. So what I hear is the importance of governance in terms of both clean government, efficient government, and also, efficient government also, not only just clean, but also do things, not just keep analyzing, delay, but getting things done. But then also financing, you mentioned, just the lack of funding and your anti-corruption initiatives is one thing to increase financing that the city can use. So these are some of the challenges. Thank you. Dr. Cameron.
Earlier I mentioned about the countrywide urban planning for the district. If you can do a proper urban planning, it will help to mitigate as well as adapt the climate change, also for the heat island and the heat wave. However, in a country like Cambodia, where data and information collection are still very limited, and sometimes they are available, but it's a big question whether these are properly collected. So the success of the measure against heat wave, heat island, and climate change depend upon very much to the availability of data throughout the country. That was why I emphasized on map presentation in regard to Phnom Penh heat island. And I wonder if in the future we can have the cooperation with the World Bank in regard to human development related to data analysis and data entry in regard to heat island and climate change. Second, climate change, heat island, heat wave is not a clear-cut issue. It doesn't belong to any particular mandate of any ministry. It tends to be Ministry of Environment mandate, partly Ministry of Land Management mandate, partly Ministry of Water Resource mandate, partly the Ministry of Public Work, Ministry of Rural Development. So there's no clear-cut coordination really to tackle the urban heat or the climate change issues per se. So sometimes it's, even we have a policy in regard to climate change and heat island measures, it's still very fragmented because of the nature of the issue itself. The third one is like other low middle income country, Cambodia also have limited resources, not only for, and especially when climate change and heat island has not been considered as a priority for the government, for just not yet, then it's very difficult to find resources from the government to really work on the climate change mitigation and adaptation in Cambodia. So I would like to share these three key factors in Cambodia with the participants.
Thank you, Dr. Cameron. So the financing is also a common issue. I hear also. Last time I remember you had integration and incentives. Now this time you talk about information. We need more data, and talk about institutional, just how to, because there's no one ministry that's totally responsible. You have to collaborate in among sort of different ministries. Yeah, and on the data, I think it is important. It's also that's I feel I visited a lot of countries and the cities, like we don't have enough data. But I think now with availability of satellite data, social media, and all these sort of different sources, we actually, there's probably a lot can be done to get what you have. So this is something that I think there's a lot of there's a lot of innovation among the different cities there. Thank you. So, but Remy,
Thank you. About the constraints for accomplish all we talk about this. First thing, as you know, Indonesia, we have so many regulation, and then regulation, different kind of regulation. Different ministries have their own regulation, and sometimes the provincial government have their own regulation. That's the main problem of Indonesia. We have so many regulation. You know, we have a project about the waste to energy that runs for almost 1.5 years now, but it's not starting yet because of we have to make the regulation same perspective right now. But hopefully, in the next month, in December, we're gonna start the project. And this is our first project that also talk about the climate change, and this is the first project that runs by the private sector. I hope with the waste to energy project in Makassar, this is the first time we learn, and then we hopefully will be another project that we're gonna do in the future. And then the second one is about the city council. The city council in Indonesia, we have so many parties. Right now we have around 18 parties, and now they're gonna run for the election in the February 2024. And then also the mayor is gonna run for the election in 2024 also in November. But hopefully with the restart of the parliament and the mayor in the 2024, and then they're gonna start again in 2025, we also gonna have a long-term city planning, that we're gonna make the city planning with the city council and the mayor with the same perspective. Hopefully, they have no issues that we're gonna talk about, because in the past 5 years now, we have so many issues with the city council, especially they come in various parties and various different kind of background, and it's very difficult to make them understand about the city planning. And also about the third one is about the city budget. You know, Makassar is among the 5 biggest cities in Indonesia, but yeah, as you know, we still thriving and we want to become the biggest city in Indonesia also. We want to achieve the highest growth economic again, because before COVID hits Makassar in 2018, our economic growth is around 8%. But that time, we have a lack of economic growth, because the economic growth only hits with the high people, not with the rich people, but because the people of the citizen in Makassar, they don't comply with the needs of the job opportunities in Makassar. So we try to develop the citizen knowledge, the citizen skills that we do in the past 3 years right now. And also, the fourth one is the mindset of the citizen. This is the biggest problem in Indonesia, especially in Makassar, because, you know, as the country of highest social media in internet in Makassar, they only doing haters with the government. That's the biggest problem. They don't want to see the government to expand, to develop. That's why and this is the big issues, because the citizen is more reliable with the other people, and then they don't trust the government anymore, because the issues is very easy to speak in the social media. And then the last but not least, I think the commitment to sustainability, because the first thing that already talked about the politic and politician in Indonesia. You know, every 5 years, the mayor and also the city council, they have to do the election. But the problem is, if the mayor or maybe the city council doesn't come from the previous parties, this is the problem in Makassar. The election one, the winner is gonna wipe out the previous program. This is the problem for us. But as you know, in 2024 we're gonna do election. Yeah. We try to make the knowledge. We want to try giving the understanding to the election. We want to make the understand to the future mayor or the future city council, because it's very important to do sustainability on development. Mm-hmm. Because you see the Yokohama building the city, not in 5 years, they do it for 30 years. And hopefully with this, my experience come to Yokohama, I can make the same experience into Makassar. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Helmi. I think what you mentioned is also has lots of resonance among many cities. You know, the politics, local politics, national politics, the governance issue, very important. The balance between short term versus consistency and stability for the long term. That's especially where you have the big challenges, long-term challenges like climate change, how to involve the public to have this long-term sort of vision. No, that's a big challenges that need leadership and the money and the financing also, as you mentioned. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So maybe I'll come back to Hashimoto-san again, maybe just look at, again, for Yokohama, you given your experience in leading the city-to-city networks. So how do you see this kind of city partnership in supporting the global goal of decarbonization and achieving the targets of climate mitigation, Paris Agreement, in your role in the city partnership?
Yes, that we are doing a city-to-city partnership for many years, maybe close to 30 years. The first of our initiative was CityNet. Some of our colleague from CityNet Secretariat is joining us today. And we have doing the city networking with the cities like Bangkok, Cebu, Da Nang, Makassar, yes, and also some other cities. So there's so many cities. We have done the city networking for the technical issues. And recently that we have started this project called the Whiteboard. It is a very focused project on environment and climate change. So I'd like to share with you our experiences with 2 slides. So can you put the 4th slide again? Yes. So of course we have a bilateral relation that the local government is usually under national government, usually. And then that so that we have to have a good bilateral relation first. Without it, we cannot do almost nothing. But we are working with a few cities and city-to-city level partnership. And very fortunately, the national government of Japan, through JICA or JBIC, recently JOIN is another entity, comes up for the urban development, provide the technical financial support and advice to the city-to-city networking, the collaboration. And one important thing for us is that this collaboration should not stop at the national and local level. But these days, we have to bring in the private sectors. The reason is very simple, that they have more resources. You know, financially, they have more resources. And they can make some investment decision beyond the political cycle, which is being mentioned by Mayor Benjamin and our friends from Makassar. Because this term of the usual political cycle is 4 years, 3 years, 5 years. Just too short to make an investment decision for the long-term urban or climate change-related decision. And also that, I mentioned perovskite as a new technologies. Some new technology, which is not being aware by the public sector, can suddenly emerge. Yeah. So that, and also that there's a chance that private sector can co-create, because our situation in Japan is very different from Thailand, very different from Cambodia, very different from Vietnam or Philippines or Indonesia. So that we have to have a solution which is appropriate for each situation, local entity. And I'd like to share with you our best example for this collaboration. Actually, this slide should be presented not by me, but by the Governor Chachat from BMA and his colleagues, Vice Governor and Advisor Prom. But we have one successful case, which was mentioned in the opening session today, that we have a collaboration more than 10 years. So what we have done together is declare the carbon neutrality together during the last Asia Smart City Conference. I really appreciate. And also, we created a master plan together with support from JICA. And this master plan is not just a document, but a lot of action plan is attached. So what is the end result? So let me share the scorecard of Yokohama. That Yokohama was able to reduce the carbon emission around 20% for the last 10 years. So what about Bangkok? More than us, of course. Close to 30%, am I correct? Yeah? I think so. Yeah, 25% or anyway, more than us. They reduced the carbon. Less than 10 years, the period of life, so that they are rapidly making that progress. So that this was actually possible. It's not a peer-to-peer, but a whole mobilization of the resources each city has. Us and Bangkok, and also we are working with the Cebu city as well, and Da Nang city. So we are working with a few selective city, and we'd like to work with other city, Baguio, like Makassar, maybe, or Cambodia. So I'd like to make appeal to everyone. So let's work together. And also I'd like to make appeal to the World Bank, especially, that this kind of a peer-to-peer working relation is really effective. And then while we were able to involve not only the local government public officials, but creating this kind of networking workshop on the ground and co-create and think about the solution. And let's work it out. And tomorrow we are going to make some announcement in the morning session to work together for the carbon neutrality. And so I hope to... I cannot conclude this session. I sound as if I'm concluding this session. I'm not doing that, but tomorrow there's a big event for us with Bangkok and us Yokohama as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Hashimoto-san. No, I think this kind of peer-to-peer learning is most important. I think we can invite technical experts, specialists that can inspire us, but I think for people to need to solve the problem on the ground, governor to governor, mayor to mayor, city office, minister to ministers, they have to deal with the issues. And the most important issues quite often is not necessarily technical. It's political, how to deal with the politics, what you can learn, how to gain the public trust. And these are the things quite often, it's not from technical experts, it's from the peers that they have the solutions that others cannot have. So, yes, please.
To correct myself, the World Bank is already doing that, doing lots of peer-to-peer collaboration, especially through the Tokyo Development Learning Center, TDLC, and the City Partnership Program. So I have to correct myself. The bank is doing that already, but they can do more.
We can do more, and we'll bring everybody many, many times to Yokohama. Thank you. So we have a little bit of time, actually. It's not 3:30 yet. So I just want to see from the participants if there are things you would like to say, if there are questions you have for the panel, comments, inspirations that you want to share. I just want to give the opportunities, and after that, I will go back to the panel to see if we have any other thoughts that I haven't discussed before I conclude our session. Yes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. Please introduce. My name is Vida. I am head of Special Planning Department under Public Works and Special Planning Office of Samarinda City. Beside me is our Vice Mayor of Samarinda City, Mr. Rusmadi. We have interest with what Mr. Toru explained about 24% of the area designated to green area, sir. I want to ask about this percentage, 24%. Are those belong to landed green area, or including the rooftop area for the 24%? And the second one, who's the ownership of the area? Does belong to government or the private sector? Because if it belongs to the private, how the government control that the area will not be changed into the more profitable area? And the third one, do you have a special regulation for each of the building in Yokohama must provide minimum of percentage for green open space? Because we are in Indonesia, we have special planning act. Each city must provide the percentage minimum of 20% of the area of the city, but we hard dealing with the land ownership. because it belongs to private ownership. So we want to have insight from the Mr. Toru according to the percentage of 24%. Maybe that's all. Thank you for the opportunity.
I don't quite understand the first question, but 24% is a top mean like a flat land area?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a 24% of the land area.
It's a landed area.
Landed area.
Excluding the green rooftop.
No, green rooftop is not inclusive.
That's
so
quite
it's like a basically park and open space.
All right.
And
so,
the second yeah.
And the second is
No, second question, I think I understand.
all right.
Is a public area. So this area is special because this is a reclaimed area. So that it started first like a public land, most of the land. So that we keep it as under the public monitoring and supervision. It's a public land.
Belong to government.
Government, yes.
Okay.
Mostly that's city of Yokohama.
All right.
Some national land. Third question is that we don't have a regulation to make the green spaces for the building, but we have an incentive and bonuses, which is if they provide open spaces, more floor area, more building floor they can create. So it's like an incentive. We don't regulate to provide a minimum, but if you provide more of the open spaces, you can build up more buildings. So that's the way to control. And the other way is that we have regional district planning. This is under the regulation. It is a Japanese law that we can regulate what can be done in a specific lot. For example, this area is a convention, but other building, they have to provide the first 3 floor like open spaces for the street people. Sorry, my poor English, but what I'm saying is that they have to provide some public functions within the building. So it's another regulation we call in Japanese chiku keikaku, which is called in a district plan. That is under our jurisdiction, our law. So that's what we can do to regulate.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Maybe let me get to the panel, maybe starting from Pahelmi. Just any other thoughts from before we close? No? Pak Cameron? Yeah, Dr. Cameron.
Thank you, Ming. Just 2 points that I would like to share. I forgot to mention earlier the measure that the municipality of Phnom Penh has taken in regard to the heat wave. Is I think with the assistance from the Korean government, we have purchased in a concessional price public buses. That public bus is powered by methane gas as well. So what the municipality of Phnom Penh cater to the public is that school children will be free of charge if they travel in the public bus. And also the fee that we charge from the general public is only a token fee, meaning it's very small fee. Just to let them know that this is public service and they have the responsibility to contribute for the maintenance of that public buses. And the bus is quite good. It's economically run because it's powered by methane gas. And also fully aircon. Second thing that I would like to share is that in regard to climate change, not so much of the heat island or heat wave, we have worked with many development partners like the World Bank, of course, with ADB, with JICA, also with MLIT, Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport of Government of Japan. We have also worked with KOICA, and we also work with other development partners. The climate change resolution that we work on are 2 levels, the policy level and the operational level. The policy level, it's more with the ministry, line ministry, and the operational level is more like Mr. Toru mentioned, it's more of the action plan. So these are the 2 keys that I would like to share with the conference here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cameron.
Oh, also, I'm sorry, forgot. I just see my colleague here from Singapore, and we also work with. We used to have work with the Temasek Foundation through like SLC, LA, and also BCA, in regard to also green building. Also, it's about how we can introduce in our policy the vertical green and also the horizontal green development as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Banji, you have any?
I have one key takeaway from this conference, and I would say it's a key learning that I need to come up with an urban heat island action plan separate from the local climate change action plan. That's what I'm going to do. I would like to thank Mega and Mark for giving us all these critical references. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Toru-san.
Yes, I'd like to thank you again for the World Bank to organize this session and bring in so many colleagues to Yokohama. Sinkamon, terima kasih, Kopun Kap, Okun, and Maraming salamat. Maybe more, but I can't actually say that. And I'd like to make one important statement, not as an expert, because I'm a host for this conference. So from 5:30, there's a reception, free of charge. So I'd like to see all of you. And before going to the serious drinking in Yokohama or in Roppongi, we are not going to stop you, but we like to do more of the interaction today. There's a few more important sessions between now and 5:30, but please come back for the reception on the G3 on the first floor so that we can talk more about our common concern for the global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think for me, this panel has been very instructive. I think a lot of the themes, I feel like we're sort of coming together. I want to come back to the theme of the event on the smart cities. What is the smart cities? We call it green cities. We call it livable cities. We call it climate resilient cities. I think in the end we are coming together. It is green, it is compact, it's energy efficient, but these are all good for the climate, but also good for the people. So good for the economy. I think that's where the challenge is. If we do it well, we can have the pie and eat it too. So we can do these things. This is why it's a smart cities. And there are a lot of things that different cities, different countries are doing that we can learn from each other. I think the challenge is come to that we discuss some of the issues, the governance issues, the institutional issues, and the financings, that these are the things that we need to address to make this happen. So I'm very happy to have this conversation, and also I want to take the opportunity to thank all the panelists. Thank you, Maksa City, Baguio cities, Cambodia government, our host Yokohama cities. I think now we are all Hamakos now. Hamakos. And then also really thank for all the participating countries and the cities coming from all over the Asia for this event. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you at the reception.
Thank you. Good.
So once again, thank you. Yes. Yes. So thank you once more.